Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress. I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for joining the broadcast, taking time off your busy schedule to continue our reading and discussion of the book Codeword Barbelon, 666 Danger in the Vatican, The Sons of Loyola and Their Plans for World Domination by P.D. Stewart. Get this book at www.luxverbi.org. That's www.luxverbi.org. And if you were listening to the program yesterday, we began our discussion about some of the Pope's vestments, particularly the pallium, which is a woolen article of clothing worn around the neck in the shape of an ankh, an Egyptian ankh. It has filthy sexual connotation, and I won't go into any detail about it other than what is given in this book. And the author continues to talk about this Egyptian ankh representing the male and female genitalia in the act of intercourse, worn around the neck of the Bishop of Rome, the Pope of Rome, the biblical Antichrist. And he continues, he says, in fact, the pallium, or the crux ansata, as it's also known as, is also a Masonic symbol of the 27th degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, called Knight Commander of the Temple. So here we have yet another connection to Freemasonry, these esoteric symbologies of the pallium worn by the Pope of Rome. And it says, one of the 5 trophies presented to the 27th degree Masonic initiate is the pallium, or the mantle of the order, with the black cross, just like the Pope's. As to the meaning behind the Pope's pallium, the famed occultist H.P. Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, writes, quote, the pallium, or the ancient stole of the bishop, is the feminine sign when worn by a priest in worship. Okay, we alluded also earlier that it is a representation of the female genitalia. And on St. Augustine's picture, it is bedecked with the Buddhistic crosses, and it says the right hand has the forefinger extended, while the Assyrian priests, like the Assyrian priests while doing homage to the grove, unquote. Blavatsky cites Dr. Inman to prove the point. Quote, when a man dons the pallium in worship, he becomes the representative of the Trinity in the unity, the Arba, or mystic four, unquote. The Jesuits have been foremost in this idolatry. Rule 6 of the Spiritual Exercises of Ignatius Loyola states, quote, praise relics of the saints, giving veneration to them and praying to the saints, and to praise stations, pilgrimages, indulgences, pardons, cruzadas, and candles lighted in the churches, unquote. Now, this is all iconographic or idolatrous and quite prohibited acts by the Roman Catholic Church. This is taught in the Jesuits' spiritual exercises. This is the Church of Antichrist. This is the Church of idolatry. He continues, he says, and why, reader, are there so many pagan occult incrustations in the vestments of the Pope? Consider the charge of Faustus, the famous Bishop of Mileve, who wrote to the great St. Augustine complaining bitterly of what he saw as a wholesale introduction of paganism into the Catholic religion. Quote, you Catholics have substituted your love feasts for the sacrifice of the pagans. for their idols, your martyrs, whom you serve with the very same honors. You appease the shades of the dead and with wine and feasts. You celebrate the solemn festivals of the Gentiles, their calends and their solstices. And as to their manners, those you have retained without any alteration. Nothing distinguishes you from the pagans except that you hold your assemblies apart from them," unquote. And it could hardly be stated more perfectly. Roman Catholicism is an eclectic mix of every pagan religion that ever preceded it. It is not Christianity by any stretch of the imagination. And to regard any Catholic organization as Christian is to continue this brainwashing, this indoctrination, this lie that permits God's people, His true Bible-believing people, to ignorantly unite with the Roman Catholic Church in this spirit of ecumenism and unity. You better know what you are uniting with in this ecumenical movement. And it's my job, my privilege here at Inquisition Update to open the eyes of God's people about this diabolical ecumenical movement. Indeed, the Roman Catholic Church does not deny this. Rather, she makes it her boast. Quote, "Our church has availed herself of practices which were in common use among pagans. Thus it is true, in a certain sense, that some Catholic rites and ceremonies are a reproduction of those of pagan creeds," unquote. That's reference number 16. That comes from John F. Sullivan, The Externals of the Catholic Church, Her Government, Ceremonies, Festivals, Sacramentals, and Devotions, produced in New York by P.J. Kennedy in 1942, page 156. Now, I don't often read the citations because this book is voluminously cited with references. And that's why I encourage you to get this book and read it for yourself and look up the citations for yourself and realize that this is real research. These words came directly from the mouths of Roman Catholics. That it is true, in a certain sense, that some Catholic rites and ceremonies are a reproduction of those of pagan creeds. And that also explains why the vestments of the Roman Catholic priests come straight out of paganism. There's absolutely nothing Christian about it. Both externally and internally, Roman Catholicism defies biblical Christianity. It is paganism, stem to stern. Now, the Catholic Church admits mockingly, quote, "It has often been charged that Catholicism is overlaid with many pagan incrustations. Catholicism is ready to accept that accusation and even to make it her boast. The great god Pan is not really dead, he's been baptized," unquote. Indeed, said Bishop Newton, quote, "the very same temples, the very same images which were once consecrated to Jupiter and other demons are now consecrated to the Virgin Mary and other saints. The whole of paganism is converted and applied to popery," unquote. That's from Thomas Newton in his dissertations on the prophecies which have remarkably been fulfilled, published in London by J.F. Dove in 1850. That's page 430 of the work. So you can look these references up yourself. He continues, he says, "Before the pagan goddess Isis, Ishtar, Iana, Semiramis, etc., was metamorphosed by Rome into the Virgin Mary. She was worshipped as the morning star, the mother of God, the hope of mankind, the queen of heaven, the faithful mediatrix, the gate of heaven. All niche titles allotted by the Greeks to the goddess Diana, or Aphrodite, whom the Ephesians called Mother of All, unquote. The Romans called her Minerva. The pagan Romans called her Minerva, Venus, Diana, or Lucifera. And her statue is still housed to this day in the Vatican. These are all pagan titles. In fact, the entire polytheism of pagan Rome, with its gods and goddesses, was brought into the Roman Catholic Church under the title of saints, and filled up the Christian calendar and crowded the temples of the church. A most cunning device of Satan, said Agabard, quote, to bring back idolatry, and under the pretext of showing honor to the saints, unquote. And do we imagine that the papal hierarchy is unaware of this idolatry? Indeed, the occult similarities of the two systems, pagan Rome and papal Rome, are better left to a different discussion. Well, I'd like to have that discussion someday on Inquisition Update, a detailed comparison between what is known as Christianity today in the Roman Catholic Church and the ancient pagan Roman customs. And it's just brushed over in this book. It's talked about, it's mentioned, but a thorough dissertation on it would stagger you. It would stagger you to see the comparison between Roman Catholicism and all the pagan religions that preceded it in history. There's virtually no difference. Quote, to think, says Blavatsky, that any of the popes, cardinals, or other high dignitaries were not aware from the first to the last of the external meanings of their symbols is to do injustice to their great learning and their Machiavellianism, unquote. Blavatsky, the great occultist, she recognized what the Roman Catholic Church was all about. And it's time for us to recognize. And if you're in an ecumenical church, that means you are uniting with this Church of Antichrist, the Roman Catholic Church. It's not a Christian religion. It is satanic. It is ancient. And it has its origins even at the Tower of Babel. And you have no choice but to flee that church. Now, chapter 50 of the book, 45, I can't read Roman numerals. It is entitled Vicarious Filii Dei, 603. It begins with a reference in Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, which we've been studying with Bill Hughes on our Thursday broadcast. Here's the quote. It says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 603. It was a method of practice among the ancients, writes Matthew Henry, to denote names by numbers. And Adam Clark confirms that representing numbers by letters of the alphabet gave rise to a practice among the ancients of representing names also by numbers. Clark adds, quote, examples of this kind abound in the writings of heathen, Jews, and Christians, unquote. Thus, it seems logical that when Revelation chapter 13, verse 18 says of the number of the beast and his number, quote, it is the number of a man, and his number is 603, we should look for a name which contains or is represented by that number, unquote. Now, for those who don't know what a score is 20. 60 is 60. So the number is 600, 6, or 360 and 6. 666. 600, 6. Now, What about the Pope's title? In the bull Unum Sanctum, promulgated by Pope Boniface VIII on November 18, 1302, we find the following: Christi Vicarius Patrique Successor, unquote, meaning Vicar of Christ, the successor of Peter. And in his book, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, Pope John Paul II confirmed that the popes still make this claim. In the first chapter titled The Pope, a Scandal and a Mystery, page 3, John Paul II writes, quote, "The Pope is considered the man on earth who takes the place of the second person of the omnipotent God of the Trinity," unquote. Takes the place of Jesus? We need not say anything about this audacious claim of the Pope, for as Calvin once said, quote, "There's no need to take much trouble in refuting things which by their extreme absurdity plainly refute themselves. Nor need we say anything of their still greater absurdities that are babbled by the canonists to justify this claim. One word will do: preposterous. Preposterous. And I have an even more powerful name to describe it, a more biblically accurate name to describe it. It is blasphemy. The supreme definition of blasphemy is to arrogate to oneself the very prerogatives of God and his throne. And that's precisely what the Pope does, and it is evidenced by the very title that he chooses for himself. On page 3 of his book, John Paul II also says the Pope, quote, represents the Son of God, unquote, on earth. This phrase is taken directly from the Latin Vicarius Filii Dei, an appellation that for centuries has been used as a title for the Pope. The use of this expression by John Paul II in his book is significant because in November of 1914, someone wrote to the editor of the official journal of the Catholic Church in America, Our Sunday Visitor, with this serious question. The question was this, quote, "Is it true that the words of the Apocalypse, that is, the book of Revelation, in the 13th chapter, 18th verse, refers to the Pope? The words referred to are these, quote, 'Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, unquote. The Inquirer explained that he meant what he meant by saying, quote, "The title of the Pope in Rome is Vicarius Filii Dei. This is inscribed on his mitre, and if you take the letters of his title, which represent Latin numerals, Roman numerals, add them together and they come to 666, unquote. In other words, the Inquirer was asking the editor of this Roman Catholic journal, Our Sunday Visitor, whether 666 had anything to do with the Pope's Latin title. You'll recall that Matthew Henry and Adam Clark revealed that, quote, "It was a method of practice among the ancients to denote names by numbers," unquote, and that, quote, "representing numbers by letters of the alphabet gave rise to a practice among the ancients of representing names also by numbers," unquote. Leaving aside for now the issue of 666, did the Pope's mitre ever bear the inscription Vicarius Filii Dei? Here is an amazing faux pas. 6 months after the inquiry about the Pope's title, in the November 15, 1914 issue of Our Sunday Visitor, another question was put to the editor, this time in the April 18, 1915 issue of Our Sunday Visitor, quote, "What are the letters supposed to be in the Pope's crown, and what do they signify, if anything?" unquote. The editor, Reverend John F. Knoll, answered the Inquirer's question as follows, which answer I quote verbatim. Says the author, quote, "The letters inscribed in the Pope's mitre are these, Vicarius Filii Dei," which is the Latin for Vicar of the Son of God. Catholics hold that the Church, which is a visible society, must have a visible head. As head of the Church, he was given the title Vicar of Christ, unquote. Now, if you have a piece of paper and pencil, I ask you to write down this official Latin title of the Pope. Vicarius Filii Dei. Now, I'll spell it for you. V as in Victor, I as in India, C as in Charlie, A as in Alpha, R as in Romeo, I as in India, U as in uniform, and S as in Sierra. That's vicarious. Filii is spelled F as in Foxtrot, I as in India, L as in Lima, and two I's as in India. That's Filii. The last word of his title is Dei, and it is spelled D as in Delta, E as in Echo, I as in India. That's his title, Vicarius Filii Dei. Now, if you'll remember, the Romans did not have the letter U in their alphabet. And anytime you ever look at original ancient Roman script, you will see that the U is replaced with a V for victory, okay? So, in Latin, it would be spelled V-I-C-A-R-I-V-S. Okay? Now, remember the numerical equivalents to these letters. This is what we're going to talk about. It says, note that the editor of this magazine was asked about the Pope's crown, but chose to give an answer about the Pope's mitre. This distinction is significant, as we shall discover. Nonetheless, he admitted to the Vicarius Filii Dei, the official title of the Pope, which means the replacement of the Son of God. A most blasphemous title. A title which God did not give him, but a title to which he arrogated to himself. He blasphemously arrogated to himself. Christ did not give him his name, nor his seat, nor his power, nor his authority. It all came from the dragon. Thus saith God in his holy word. He is a man who comes in his own name, not one which was given to him by the Creator of all heaven and earth. He is an impostor, a nuclear-powered blasphemer, and he rules this country and the world. You're listening to the Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Have you seen the Left Behind movies? Have you read the Left Behind fictional book series? Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. Because they see the world stage shaping to fulfill what they have been led to believe is sound biblical interpretation, a left behind rapture scenario, this false view of prophecy is reinforced in the mind, not only of its adherents, but also includes those who have been merely exposed to the specific media. Is it possible that false prophecy can be fulfilled? The rapture theories have always been in dispute. Pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib disputes have risen up in exclusively evangelical circles of recent history, so that when true believers don't suddenly disappear, this element will easily go by the wayside when all see a new Jewish temple begin to be built. Will this be part of the great delusion that will come upon the whole earth? It seems that this great prophetic delusion has already overcome practically the entire American evangelical and Christian world. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. To learn more, visit crosstheborder.org. That's CROSS, crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you enjoy Inquisition Update, please support Inquisition Update by supporting FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And we're going to return now to our discussion about the official title of the Pope, Vicarius Filii Dei. And we ask the question, what does this have to do with 666, the number of the beast, the number of a man? And for those who didn't have a piece of paper and pencil handy when I spelled the Pope's title, I encourage you to grab one now, because we're going to do it again. And you can do this exercise yourself and show family and friends. This is going to be a subject of discussion, certainly, among anybody who knows it, who has never heard it before. And it may well, and I believe does, answer the question of the number of the beast. The author continues now. He says, as we saw above, in 1915, the Catholic Church admitted that Vicarius Filii Dei was inscribed on the Pope's mitre. And prior to that, in the November 15th, 1914 issue of our Sunday Visitor on page 3, someone wrote into the editor asking whether 666 had anything to do with the Pope's title, his Latin title, Vicarius Filii Dei. Now, if you have that piece of paper and pencil handy, I'll spell this again phonetically so that you can spell it properly. Now, before I even begin, I want you to realize that in the Roman numerals, or in the Latin alphabet, there is no letter U, as in uniform. So it is replaced with the letter V. Now, to demonstrate that this is no sleight of hand or trickery, you can look this up for yourself. I once even saw a picture of the address on a package covering a wrapping of a book, a gift that Pope John Paul II gave to the one of the Fatima children, whose name escapes me right now, the last one to survive. It'll come to me in a moment. But he gave her a gift prior to his passing. He gave a book, and he signed it, John Paul II, but he signed it in Latin. John Paul II is Johannes Paulus II. And everywhere the U in his signature was replaced with a V. So that is the official Latin letter U, is the V. And it has a numerical equivalent of 5, as most of us know. But if those who don't, we're going to give the equivalents too when we finish this. Now, the proper spelling of the Pope's official Latin title, the replacement of the Son of God on earth, is Vicarius Filii Dei, and it is spelled this way: V as in Victor, I as in India, C as in Charlie, A as in Alpha, R as in Romeo, I as in India, U, and it should be replaced with the letter V as in Victor, and S as in Sierra. Now, Filii is spelled F as in Foxtrot, I as in India, L as in Lima, and then 2 more I's as in India. And the last word, Dei, is spelled D as in Delta, E as in Echo, I as in India. D-E-I. The proper spelling is V-I-C-A-R-I-V-S F-I-L-L-I-I-D-E-I. Okay, I hope you've had your paper and pencil handy. Now we're going to give you the numerical equivalents for these Latin characters, and you can add them up for yourself. He says, the Inquirer quoted Revelation chapter 13:18, which says, quote, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. In other words, the Inquirer was suggesting that the Pope's official Latin title, Vicarius Filii Dei, added up to 666. And you will recall that Matthew Henry and Adam Clark said, quote, "It was a method of practice among the ancients to denote names by numbers, and representing numbers by letters of the alphabet gave rise to the practice of representing names also by numbers." So it works both ways. Now, the Hebrew, Chaldean, Latin, Greek, and Arab languages have numerical value for some of the letters in their alphabets. In other words, this isn't just Rome that does this, but Rome certainly does, and most of us are aware of this. Now it says, take for instance the original Roman letters, I as in India, V as in Victor, X as in X-ray, L as in Lima, C as in Charlie, and D as in Delta. The letter M was added later and thus was not a part of the original system. Added together, we get I, which has the numerical equivalent of 1. So I equals 1. V as in Victor equals 5. X equals 10. L equals 50. L as in Lima equals 50. C as in Charlie equals 100. And D as in Delta equals 500. And if you transpose the numerical equivalents of these letters above the letters of the Pope's official Latin title, Vicarius Filii Dei, remembering that the U in the word vicarious is replaced with a V, as is normal in Latin, add them together, you get 666. And I invite all my listeners to try this. It says, many of the ancient names or appellations used for the sun god in the various pagan religions also added to 666. Roy A. Anderson writes, quote, amulets called sigilla solis, or the sun seal, were worn by the pagan priests, and they contained all the numbers from 1 to 36. The veneration of the ancients had for the sun god in a figure in the Berlin Museum. There were and are 36 squares arranged with the numbers 1 to 36 in such a way that adding the numbers of any column, either horizontally or vertically, and also the two diagonals crossing the square, the total is the same, 111. The sum of the 6 columns computed either horizontally or vertically is 6 times 111, or 666, unquote. Likewise, all the avatars and emanations or the incarnations of the sun god are called Buddhas, or races, or the sun, or an alternate spelling, S-I-U-N. The Greek word for Buddha is X-I-U-V, or X-I-U-N, which stands for wisdom of the sun, S-U-N, and it also adds up to 666. In ancient times, the cycle bird of fire, or what we know as the phoenix, remember it rises up out of its ashes, the return of the phoenix, it was worshipped as the bright and morning star. The old spelling of phoenix, the shining one, is P-H-E-N-E-X, or F-N-E-X in Greek. It's interesting to note that Lucifer is also called Son of the Morning, or the Shining One, according to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. When we add the numerical value of F-E-N-E-X in Greek, we get 666. The New Testament was written in Greek. The ancient Greek name for the sun was Titan, T-E-I-T-A-N. Add its Greek numerical values, and we also get 666. T equals 300, E equals 5, I equals 10, T equals 300, A equals 1, and N equals 50. 666. Titan in Greek was in fact the Chaldean or the Babylonian for Shaitan, spelled S-H-E-I-T-A-N, the very name by which Satan or Lucifer was called. The legendary Greek poet Homer says, quote, all the gods of Tartarus, unquote, or hell, quote, were called Titans, unquote. And in the doctrine of the mysteries brought from Pergamus to Rome, the Son was said to be the one only true God, Titan, or Satan. And he gives a long citation here for this, and it's Greek to me, so I won't read it, but nonetheless, you can get the book and see it for yourself. And he continues, he says, however, Satan, or Titan, or Shaitan, is not a man. And Revelation 13:18 says that 666 is the number of a man. So we must look to a man. Now this is the riddle. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. We're not talking about the name of the beast. We're talking about the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And his number is 666, Revelation 13:18. And here's the same verse in Greek. There is 666. So it gives the Greek characters. And it would be hard for me to describe the appearance of these Greek characters because they don't equate to anything. The first two look vaguely like an X and an E, and the last one looks like the top half of an S with an apostrophe over it. That's the best I can do on radio. If I had video, I could show you. Anyway, it says this is the most fascinating riddle in all of the Bible. The preceding verses 16 and 17, reveal, quote, no one may buy or sell except he who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Revelation 13, verse 16 and 17. In other words, the mark of the beast is found in the number of his name. The number of the beast, 666. So we know two things. Number one, that 666 is the number of a man, and two, we need wisdom to count that number. The need for wisdom indicates that the passage constitutes a kind of riddle or code requiring some kind of special knowledge to comprehend. This is a very fascinating riddle, a Holy Spirit riddle, and God wants us to solve it. The riddle applies to popery. Here is wisdom. It is a practice or a custom in ancient times to add together the numbers indicated by the letters of a man's name, and the sum total thus produced what is called the number of the man. If we turn to the Pope's personal title, or name in Latin, Vicarius Filii Dei, and using the Roman alphabet, we have the master key to the mastery or the mystery of popery in Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. Vicarius Filii Dei. Remember that the letter U in vicarious is replaced with the Roman numeral V. Here it is. V equals 5, I equals 1, C equals 100, A equals 0. It has no numerical equivalent in the Latin alphabet and the Latin numerical system. R is 0. It does not have any numerical equivalent. I, again, is 1. V is 5. And S is 0. Filii, F equals 0, I equals 1, L equals 50, I equals 1, and I equals 1. Dei, D equals 500, E equals 0, and I equals 1. Add them together, you get 666. In Fleming's Rise and Fall of Rome Papal, it is asserted that the title Vicarius Filii Dei was not only assumed by the Roman pontiff, the Pope, but was also once inscribed over the door of the Vatican. This is a reference from Robert Fleming in his Rise and Fall of Rome Papal, published in London, by Holston and Stoneman, 1849, again in 1701, which is a reprint of the original. You'll find this quoted on pages 47 and 48 of the work. Not only is Latin the official language of the Roman Catholic cult, it is perhaps just a little curious, too, that it was the year 666 that Pope Vitalian decreed that all public worship should be in Latin. It is even more mind-blowing that the names or titles that apply to the Pope's dominion add to 666 in 3 different languages, as shown next in the book. And it gives them in the 3 languages, and it shows their numerical equivalents, and they all equal 666. And it would be laborious and confusing for me to try to describe this, these Latin character, or these Greek and Arabic characters on the radio, so you'll just have to get the book and see it for yourself. It's amazing. It truly is amazing. It rises beyond the possibility of coincidence. Let's put it that way. And that is not all, says the author. Not only does the official title and place of the Pope's dominion add to 666, but even his chosen descriptive name, Roman, or Latianos, Lateinos, adds to 666. Have you ever wondered why the Catholic Church has chosen to be called the Roman Catholic Church as opposed to, say, Holy Catholic Church? Was Jesus a Roman? Were any of his disciples or apostles Roman? Was Peter, from whom the Pope even claims to have received his popedom, was he a Roman? So why is the Pope's church called Roman or Latianos? Reader, the answer is simple. The word Roman or Latianos is the key by which we solve the most well-known but the least understood Bible riddle, Revelation 13 and verse 18. Revelation 13:18 uses the ancient custom or wisdom of counting the alphanumerical letters in names to finger the man and the system that will bear the mark of the beast, 666, the Pope's title, the Pope's signature. I will now quote you several titles or names that apply to the Pope and his kingdom, the papacy, the Holy See, each of which adds also to 666. The word Pope in Hebrew means a Roman and adds up in Hebrew to 666. In Greek, it means the Latin king and adds to 666. Equally, Latianus Deceptor, or the Latin deceiver, adds to 666. Latianus Sacerdos means Latin priest, also adds to 666. Latianus Rex Deceptor, the royal Latin deceiver, adds to 666. Latianus Rex Deceptor Papa, the royal Latin deceiver, the Pope, also adds to 666. Latianus Rex Doctor Papa, the royal Latin doctor, the Pope, adds up to 666. And finally, the Latianus Rex Sacerdos Papa, the royal Latin priest, the Pope, adds to 666. There, says the author, as Tesham Gregg said to the Catholic priest McGuire, what do you make of that? As they say, these truths are self-evident. You can verify all the above Latin names and their numerical values in any good Latin text. These facts nullify any possible answer or objection to the Pope's supporters and my Jesuit opponents could ever muster. I must conclude that this part of the analysis, my time is nearly exhausted. The following orthography is conclusive. All other Jesuit interpretations are spurious. I submit these facts for your careful attention, says P.D. Stewart. Now, of course, Rome is going to heatedly deny all of this. Rome has literally gone out of its way to shed any spiritual or biblical connection of the papacy to the biblical Antichrist. And they have denied these numerical equivalents of the Pope's official title, and they set up many systems of deception also to shed the Pope's culpability as the biblical Antichrist. It's imperative that if the Pope is going to deceive the whole world, he must convince the world, especially those in the Christian world, the so-called Christian world, that he is not, and in fact cannot be, the biblical Antichrist. And as we've talked about so many times on this broadcast, this is where we get preterism. Preterism, that's the idea that the Pope was Antiochus Epiphanes or Nero or some other figure back 2,000 years ago that was destroyed, and Antichrist is not a concern for anyone in the world. He's already been destroyed. That is the doctrine and belief of and the teaching of the preterist interpretation of Bible prophecy. They say that all the prophecies having to do with the biblical Antichrist were fulfilled by the year 70 A.D. So you can get only one conclusion of that. The Pope cannot be the biblical Antichrist, because the Antichrist has already been destroyed. And also from that, the inference is that the Pope is indeed Christian, and that it is his divine prerogative to build a universal Christian religion, a kingdom of Christ on earth. That is the New World Order. That's the agenda that the Vatican is following, to deceive the whole world from believing that he is in fact the biblical Antichrist, as all the Protestant reformers assured us, but that he is instead building a Christian kingdom, a universal Christian kingdom on the earth, a visible kingdom with a visible head, an earthly kingdom with an earthly head, and that is a direct contradiction to the teachings of the Scriptures. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my people fight." The Pope is trying to build an earthly, worldly, Antichrist kingdom. It is not Christianity. It is blasphemy, and we have to abandon our ecumenical churches. We have to take a stand for Christ and renounce Antichrist, and we'll do that again. Continuing the reading. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for Nicholas Arthur's Cross the Border.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.